Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Padavajagacharya Stotra Satashishimad. His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. ISKCON BBD Founder Charya Srila Prabhupada Ki. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Padavajagacharya Stotra Satashishimad. His Divine Grace Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Ki. Ananta Gaudiya Vaishnavrinda Ki. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki. Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasati Gaura Bhaktivinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shamakunda Radhakunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Navadvip Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Ganga Jamuna Maya Ki Jai. Tulasi Devi Maharani Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Harinam Sankirtana Ki Jai. Vrihat Madanga Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Gurun Gadanga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 1st Canto, Chapter 9, Text 48. Tataha. I'm going to do something different today. Not that different, but a little different. I'm going to do the word for word, and then we're going to chant the Sanskrit. Because that way, when you're chanting the Sanskrit, you hopefully have some better understanding of what we're chanting. Tataha, thereafter. Yudhishthira, Maharaj Yudhishthir. Gatva, there. Saha, with. Krishna, the Lord. Gajavayam, in the capital name Gajavaya, Hastinapur. Pitaram, unto his uncle, Dhritarashtra. Santvayam, Asha, consoled. Gandharim, the wife of Dhritarashtra. Cha, and. Tapasvinam, an ascetic lady. Okay. Tato Yudhishthiro Gatva. Tato Yudhishthiro Gatva. Saha Krishno Gajavayam. Saha Krishno Gajavayam. Pitaram Santvayam Asha. Pitaram Santvayam Asha. Gandharim cha tapashvinam. Gandharim cha tapashvinam. Tato Yudhishthiro Gatva. Saha Krishno Gajavayam. Pitaram Santvayam Asha. Gandharim cha tapashvinim. Others. Tato Yudhishthiro Gatva. Vaishnavis. Okay, translation. Thereafter, Maharaj Yudhishthira at once went to his capital, Hastinapur, accompanied by Lord Sri Krishna, and there he consoled his uncle and aunt Gandhari, who was an ascetic. Purport. Actually, before we go on, does everybody know what an ascetic is? Just in case you don't. An ascetic is a person who practices severe self-discipline and abstention from all forms of indulgence, typically for religious reasons. So, in case you didn't know, now you do. Okay, so purport. Dhritarashtra and Gandhari, the father and mother of Duryodhana and his brothers, were the elder uncle and aunt of Maharaj Yudhishthira. After the battle of Kurukshetra, the celebrated couple, having lost all their sons and grandsons, were under the care of Maharaj Yudhishthira. They were passing their days in great agony over such a heavy loss of life, and were practically living the life of ascetics. The death news of Bhishmadev, uncle of Dhritarashtra, was another great shock for the king and the queen, and therefore they required solace from Maharaj Yudhishthira. Maharaj Yudhishthira was conscious of his duty, and he at once hurried to the spot with Lord Krishna and satisfied the bereaved Dhritarashtra with kind words from both himself and the Lord also. Gandhari was a powerful ascetic, although she was living the life of a faithful wife and a kind mother. It is said that Gandhari also voluntarily closed her eyes because of the blindness of her husband. A wife's duty is to follow the husband cent per cent, and Gandhari was so true to her husband that she followed him even in his perpetual blindness. Therefore, in her actions, she was a great ascetic. Besides that, the shock she suffered because of the wholesale killing of her 100 sons and her grandsons was also certainly too much for a woman. But she suffered all this just like an ascetic. Gandhari, although a woman, is no less than Bhishmadev in character. They are both remarkable personalities in the Mahabharata. Chakshurin militam yena tasmai Shri Gurave namaha. Shri Chaitanya manobishtam stapitam yena bhutale. Swayam rupakaramayam dadapti swaparantikam. So, Prabhupada's saying here in this purport about how Gandhari is a woman, but he's saying no less than Bhishmadev in character. And final comment is they're both remarkable personalities in the Mahabharata. So we've been hearing, probably for about the last month now, I guess, or a few weeks anyway, about Bhishmadev. So since Prabhupada has said that Gandhari is no less than Bhishmadev in character, and today's verse is kind of about her. I mean, one of the two paragraphs of the purport is dedicated to her, and she's mentioned in the translation, and the purport will try to maybe say a little something about her. So Gandhari is the younger sister of Shakuni. Gandhar is Afghanistan. That was the part of the world that her father was ruling. And she was famous for being, Prabhupada says actually in one place in the Bhagavatam, that she was the most beautiful woman of her time. Most beautiful woman of her time. And she worshiped, as a young girl, she worshipped Lord Shiva. She wanted a benediction. She wanted 100 sons. And she actually got that benediction from Lord Shiva. Somehow or another, it was arranged that she married Dhritarashtra. And she didn't flinch. No, Dhritarashtra was, as we all know, blind from birth. And when she found out that that was who she was arranged to marry, she accepted that. And as mentioned here in today's purport, she voluntarily closed her eyes and blindfolded herself because she didn't want to feel superior to her husband. As my husband can't see, but I can see, so no. So if my husband can't see, then I can't see. So that was a voluntary austerity she accepted, and she had many other good qualities. But Prabhupada mentions that, and she was also renowned for that. It wasn't that she was just beautiful. She was understood to be somebody who's very cultured, etc. But she was, like Prabhupada says in another purport, that she had this competitive nature. Both her and Kunti, Queen Kunti, were pregnant at the same time. And he doesn't specifically state the reason, but if there was any... Anyway, she wanted to give birth first, but Kunti gave birth first to Yudhishthira. Yudhishthira is older than Duryodhana. And that was really a cause of angst for her. She, was very unhappy about that. That my rival, my competitor, has given birth first to a male child, maybe eclipsing the importance of my son, who will be to be born. So anyway, so she was at that time she was pregnant, and she struck her abdomen. She gave a blow to her abdomen out of frustration. And what happened was she gave birth to a lump. A lump, came out, and not alive. But then that lump was divided into 100 pieces, and each one of those pieces came to be developed into a living male child. So the benediction was fulfilled. She had 100 male sons. The oldest of whom was, of course, Duryodhana, and I believe the second oldest was Dushashan. And now, interesting, this is a very important point too. She wasn't in favor of the war. She was not in favor of the war. And she actually blamed her husband. Her opinion was that she acknowledged the right of the Pandavas to have some kingdom. And she was in favor of that. Okay, it should be divided into two parts. One for the Pandavas and one for my sons. That's the fair way to do it. But, it wasn't what was going on. But that was her stance on the whole thing. Okay? And that's significant. I'll get back to that in a second, or in a minute. When her sons were all killed in the Battle of Kurukshetra, she was very much affected by that, tremendously. All 100 sons killed, and she was ready to curse both Yudhishthira and Bhima, but Vyasadeva preached to her and talked her out of it, and she was submissive. So she was controlled, she was submissive to Vyasadeva. That's to her great credit. And Vyasadeva at some later point actually let her see how her sons were promoted to the heavenly planets. Now and of course she passed away with her husband in the Himalayan mountains in some jungle forest fire. That's how she met her end. But the most famous story, probably, in connection with Gandhari, is the story about how she wanted to protect her eldest son, Duryodhana. See? So in other words, like her husband, Dhritarashtra, who in other places is also mentioned as realizing he was doing the wrong thing. She was aware, as I just mentioned, she wanted that the kingdom be divided between the Pandavas and the Kauravas. So she realized that was the fair and the right thing to do. But despite that, she was a mother. And that was her oldest son, and she wanted to protect him. So she devised a scheme. Prabhupada explains that by accepting that vow of voluntary blindness, she acquired power. And Prabhupada says anybody who follows some regulative principle like that acquires some power. So anyway, austerity translates into power at some point. So anyway, so she understood that she had some power, and her idea was that, okay, I'm going to use the results of all my austerities to benedict my son in such a way that he will be invulnerable, and therefore he won't be able to be killed. That's what she's mostly concerned about. I don't want my son to be killed. So she, without revealing the details to him, how it was what was exactly going to happen and how it was going to work, she called her son and she told her son, Duryodhana, I want you to come here tomorrow at this time, completely naked. And Duryodhana, okay, yeah, the next day he was in the palace, and he was in the process of going to where his mother was, and he was completely naked as she instructed him. And Krishna he bumped into Krishna, just coincidentally, not exactly coincidentally, but he bumped into Krishna, and Krishna said, Duryodhana, what's going on? Because in Vedic culture, you don't walk around naked. I mean, even now, people, you don't walk around naked. You get arrested. What to speak of then? I mean, you weren't even supposed to see yourself naked. In Vedic culture, you don't even see yourself naked. You're wearing a gamsha. Even when at least this is what brahmacharis are taught. When you bathe, you're always wearing something. You're wearing a gamsha, and then you just take that gamsha off and put the dry gamsha like that. So it's really, it's really outrageous. So Krishna saw that, and he said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Oh, well," he realized that how unusual it was. So he said, well, my mother has told me to come to where she is, and she specifically instructed me I should be completely naked. And he said, yeah, well, I mean, okay, fair enough, but come on, at least you got to put a gamsha on, at least, put some, something, kopin on, kopin. So okay, langota, I think is the word, right? Langota, just something that would cover his, his loins there. So okay, yeah, because he also felt like, because she didn't explain it to him. She didn't explain to him what she was going to do. You see, so or at least, even if I don't actually, be honest with you, I'm not completely 100% sure on that detail if it was explained to him previously or not. But in any event, Krishna was able to convince him to put on that langota, and he did. So then he appeared, there before his mother, and his mother said, okay, he said, Mother, I'm here. And she said, okay, very good. And then she, whatever she did, and she unblindfolded herself, and she looked at his body, from head to toe, like, some rays, and every part of the body that was naked became like iron, became invulnerable, right? But then after she did that, after she'd already unblindfolded herself and did all this, she realized, oh, well, wait a second, you're wearing this garment there. What are you doing? And he said, well, he explained that I was going through the palace halls and I bumped into Krishna, and he said, you can't go before your mother like that. You got to put something on. And so that sounded reasonable to me, more than reasonable, so I did. She said, oh, no. She realized Krishna has foiled me, Krishna has foiled, she had that desire to protect her son, but then she realized, no, Krishna has outsmarted me. And so what is, there's a very important lesson to be learned from this pastime. Who'd like to take a shot at it? Is any uninitiated devotee would like to say, what is the lesson to be learned from this pastime, this particular incident? What? Yeah, Georgie? Woo! Let's have a big round of applause for this bhakta. Wow, that's exactly right. Do you know the Sanskrit? Okay. Does any other uninitiated devotee know the Sanskrit for that one? How about first initiated devotee? If Krishna wants to kill you, nobody can protect you, and if Krishna wants to protect you, nobody can kill you. Okay. Jai Jai. Yeah, that's right. Rake Krishna Madike, Madhe Krishna. Was it? Just say Madhe Krishna. Rake Krishna Madike, Madhe Krishna. If Krishna wants to kill you, nobody. If Krishna wants to protect you, nobody can kill you, and if Krishna wants to kill you, nobody can protect you. In other words, the purpose of Krishna cannot be frustrated. You know. So, and she realized that. She had her plan, but then Krishna had his plan, and Krishna's plan emerged victorious. So, there's an important lesson there for us there. That even in our own attempts to become Krishna conscious, there's a certain way in which we've been told, to be devotees and perform devotional service in order to be successful, which involves things like, of course, chanting 16 rounds, following the four regulative principles. I just heard maybe yesterday on a lecture Prabhupada said, a lecture he gave in Vrindavan, he was lecturing on the nectar of devotion, and he was talking about how devotional service everything begins with Mangal Arti. He said, you got to get up early. He said, you have to rise early, and you have to come to Mangal Arti. It's like it was an absolute must if you want to make advancement in Krishna consciousness. So, like that. All the other things, and then trying to not only become Krishna conscious, but try to participate in the spreading of Krishna consciousness, cooperate, help in some way or another, if not being a frontline soldier, being somebody who's supporting the effort. So that's the program we've been given to become Krishna conscious. And but if we're thinking like Gandhari was thinking that, I got some other idea, then we might find out like Gandhari found out that doesn't work. See, so Rake Krishna Madike, Madhe Krishna Rake. If Krishna wants us to perform devotional service in a certain way in order to be successful, then that's what we got to do. And if we're not going to surrender to that, okay, well everybody's got that free choice, but we might find that we don't come up with the result that we're hoping for. So that's an important thing to meditate on. That once again, Krishna's will cannot be frustrated. The way Krishna wants things to happen, that's the way it's got to happen. And you got to cooperate with that. So that's an important point for that, in that pastime. So I wanted to also speak a little bit about Dwarkadish Prabhu, say a little something. For those of you, most of us, well, I don't know, there's a lot of new devotees here, but many of us know who Dwarkadish is. For those of you who don't, that's his picture there. That photo on the base of Prabhupada's Vyasasana is Dwarkadish, and he was a long-standing member of this community. He was active in this community for at least, Brinjanath, 35 years? I believe it's since like the early 80s, about 83 or something like that. But he started his Krishna consciousness before that. About a year ago or so, I was able to, I was friends with him. I mean, he was a tax preparer, or he had, he worked for Jackson Hewitt tax accountancies, and so he prepared my taxes, and so I got to know him a bit. And at one occasion, I asked him about how he became a devotee and like that. So he explained to me that his father was a merchant, had some sort of store, maybe I think it was a jewelry store in Bombay, and devotees came to try to make him a life member. Actually, specifically, he mentioned it was Sridhar Maharaj, the late Sridhar Maharaj, Prabhupada disciple Sridhar Maharaj, who came to, try to get his father to become a life member. And his father wasn't, his father did, he became a member, but he wasn't interested in the whole thing. He just, yeah, sure, here you go, here's the whatever, the payment. But Dwarkadish was interested, and he asked a lot of questions to Sridhar Maharaj. Sridhar Maharaj preached to him, gave him books, and he read the books, and he really liked him. This is when he was a very young college student. I can't remember. He told me, it's been a year, 20 years old, plus or minus, at that point. And so he became inspired. And from that point onwards, he became interested in Krishna consciousness. And, for the rest of his schooling, he was practicing Krishna consciousness, and he came here. He was active out in Placentia. They had some sort of preaching center out there, and he was active with that. And so, pretty much from the time he was about, say, 20 years old, he's was approximately the same age as me, 67, like that. He was practicing Krishna consciousness for the last, say, 45 years, 45 plus years of his life. So he's been practicing for a while, and he's, a serious person about whatever he did. He was successful, very, very successful material, and he was a very serious devotee as well. So, so I received an email or a text message from his daughter yesterday, and it's an email they were going to send to the devotees, which they may have already done, but probably not everybody is on their email mailing list. So I'll read it because it's very well written and obviously very relevant. So it's from the family, actually. It says, "Dear devotees, Hare Krishna, please accept our humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Sri Guru and Gauranga. Thank you for all the heartfelt prayers, phone calls, emails, texts, etc. We are overwhelmed by your love and support." On his way home from work on Friday, Dwarkadish Das was in a car accident. All we know is that he had severe head injury and trauma to the brain. The doctors had to perform emergency surgery. After the surgery, they said his brain function was at 1%, and there was no hope for recovery. So, with a heavy heart and the blessings of our Guru Maharaj, His Holiness Bhakti True Swami, we decided to take him off of life support. Before we took him off of life support, Guru Maharaj called and gave him final instructions. In parentheses it says, we held the phone to his ear. According to Guru Maharaj's instructions, we applied tilak to his head and body, tulsi leaves on his chest and in his mouth, Ganga Jal and water from other sacred rivers in his mouth, and sprinkled on his head the Shringa Kavacha, and sprinkled that on his head, the Shringa Kavacha on his head, dry tulsi sticks and dust on his chest, maha garlands from his Ishtadev Rukmini Dwarkadish and Rukmini Dwarkanath around his neck and body, and dust from Vrindavan on his chest and head. We chanted the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, the Shringa prayers, the Shringa Kavacha prayers, Govindam prayers, and Jai Radhe, Jai Krishna, Jai Vrindavan Bhajan. Surrounding him were Nirantar Prabhu, Jagadambika Mataji, and his family, including his brother and his brother's wife. In addition to that, Naikatma Prabhu instructed all the devotees that were available to come here into the temple room, and we also were simultaneously conducting a kirtan here in the temple room for the deities during that period from about 3 to 4 o'clock, or a little bit beyond that, which is exactly the same time when this was happening. So it goes on to say, when they removed the ventilator, Prabhupada's chanting was playing in his ears, and we were all chanting japa loudly. Within a few minutes, he breathed from his mouth, and he opened his eyes as if to say, Hare Krishna to us. And then, with one final breath from his mouth, he left his body on the auspicious day of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's appearance day. He passed his final exam in such an auspicious and glorious way. Our Guru Maharaj has always said that the way one leaves his body determines his next destination. We are positive that he went back to Godhead. Although he is in a better place, we are left with the burden of suffering from his separation, and as he was the backbone of our family and the light in our lives. We are going to miss him dearly, and we will never be the same. While we deeply appreciate all of the calls and messages, please forgive us for not being able to respond during this difficult time. Thank you again for your invaluable support and continued prayers. These are these are giving us the strength to keep going. Your servants, Bilavati Devi Dasi, Nihar and Janavi, Radha Mohini Devi Dasi, and Sri Goloka Das. So does anybody have any questions or anything they'd like to say? Sachidanoy.
Gandhari and Krishna.
Yeah.
And the interaction they have about Duryodhana. Protecting sometimes can become, it bewilders us how Krishna mystical acts in our lives. I've seen that sometimes when we had some difficulties, in our movement, the desire of the devotees altogether is that we want to become successful in something. Like, for example, you want to open Food for Life, food like in UCLA or in USC or whatever, and everybody would like that to happen, and it looks like a really good cause, and why shouldn't that happen? After all, you're thinking. And then we make prayers, and sometimes I send devotees go to the yagya and everything, but suddenly we see that it didn't happen, right? So it might become bewildering. Krishna had maybe a different plan. Is it better? And then we were thinking, why shouldn't that happen? And then also, even when a family member is going through very difficult times, sometimes we also, everybody would like him to have to our liking. We would like to see that person to get well so he can carry on with his Krishna consciousness. And suddenly it's the opposite. That person leaves. And so sometimes it may appear something that is already predestined. So my final point is that, can you explain something like that? It may appear to be that it's already predestined, that is something is going to be like this no matter what you do.
Well, back some weeks ago, there was a verse there, actually when Bhishma Dev, before he offered his prayers, I don't know if I could find it easily. Let's see, just before he started offering his prayers, he made a couple. There was a few steps. This is his statement. He says, "Oh, what terrible sufferings and what terrible injustices you good souls suffer for being the sons of religion personified. You did not deserve to remain alive under those tribulations, yet you were protected by the Brahmins, God, and religion." And Prabhupada says here in the purport, he says, as long as a person is fully in cooperation with the wishes of the Lord, guided by bona fide Brahmins and Vaishnavas, and strictly following religious principles, one has no cause for despondency, however trying the circumstances of life. So that's it. Right there, that's the guideline, just to make sure that whatever we're doing is strictly following, we're guided by bona fide Brahmins and Vaishnavas, and we're strictly following religious principles. And however trying the circumstances, we shouldn't be despondent, because underlying that is the philosophical point that Krishna is omnibenevolent. His standard understanding of a supreme being is that he's omniscient, omnipotent, and the third one is omnibenevolent. So it's easy for people to understand how God is all-powerful and all-intelligent. Sometimes people have a tough time with that one. How could, if you look around at the world today, because we're thinking in terms of, benevolence, in terms of things going well for us in this body, in this world. See? But that's not Krishna's way of thinking of benevolence. Krishna's way of, vision of benevolence is getting us out of this, getting the soul out of this material world and taking us back home, back to Godhead. So in other words, Krishna is omnibenevolent, and whatever is going to happen, it's especially for devotees, especially for people who are mentioned here, are guided by bona fide Brahmins and Vaishnavas and strictly following religious principles. We should understand that whatever's going on in our life, it's for the good. Krishna's omnibenevolent, He's involved in the lives of his devotees. It's superficially, it might appear like, it's a very trying circumstance of life, but ultimately, Krishna's hand is there. Krishna's present in that, and it's for our ultimate welfare. It's for our ultimate benefit that we're having to go through whatever we have to go through, because in the long run, it's meant for our purification and for accelerating the process of taking us back home, back to Godhead. Confirmed. I don't know where that was from. That's the best thing I could say about that. One other question here.
About Bhrgupati Prabhu, he had a center also in Ujjain, India, right? The same one?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So I didn't know him from here, but he visited Milan, Italy, a couple of years ago when I was there. So I saw he was a very nice devotee, and he asked me to come to Ujjain to paint some murals on the wall of the temple there. And I agreed to do it, and he was so happy about that. He was so, he told, I heard from other devotees that he was so enlivened by that someone was going to come and paint the temples paint the walls in that temple. But then I had other service. I got other service in Italy, so I couldn't do it, and I had to tell him that I declined. And then he was disappointed, and I didn't hear back from him again. But it was just a real nice devotee. I wish I would have had a chance to do that now. I still thought that after some service I would still go and do that service for him because he was so enthusiastic about it. But no, now I can't. But
yeah, this is by no means a memorial service. I mean, it's so many things that should be said. But I mean, I mentioned it the other morning, but he was one of the major contributors for the gold leafing on the altar there. And I think he was also involved in actually arranging the different disciples of Bhakti Trumaj to come out and do it. And then he also bared a major portion of the expense for that. And Rabindranath could, of course, testify that he was one of his most steady and reliable pujaris for years on Sunday doing the artik and for festivals and like that. So I mean, there's so many wonderful services that he performed. Okay, so I guess we could end there. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Oh, wait, somebody wants to say something. Go ahead.
I just have one thing that...
Speak into the microphone so everybody could hear you.
That Dwarkadish did, which I thought was just amazing. It was just so wonderful. When my mother left her body, she left her body here, and she was 100 years old. He told me a day or two later that he and his family had chanted an entire round of japa for her. I was just amazed because he didn't know her,
Yeah.
I'm not really that close to him.
Yeah,
either.
he was a sensitive person. I mean, I remember he kind of...
Yeah, I don't... Yeah, he's very wonderful.
Thank you. Oh, well, one more person want to say something? Bhakta Avatar, and then we'll wrap it up.
Every person that he would meet, he would say Hare Krishna to. And a lot of people would ask, because he'd have his bead bag on, so people would say, oh, what happened to your hand? And then he would explain to them what he was doing and talk about Krishna consciousness. And he would do that on a daily basis. So he, met a lot of people and preached to them. Yeah.
Actually, everybody knows Jai Chaitanya, right? Well, he was his kind of like Vartma Pradakshina guru. He actually was a big inspiration for Jai Chaitanya coming to Krishna consciousness. He used to preach to him, and he actually, he encouraged him to go to the temple out in Placentia, and then eventually and to come here as well. So he had played a big role in Jai Chaitanya's becoming a devotee. Hopefully, we'll have an opportunity to kind of, do this in a proper way and talk more about him. Okay, so Granth Srimad Bhagavatam ki
Is
jai,
there
Srila
a-
Prabhupada ki jai.